Welcome back, one and all, to Hearthstone Grandmasters. This is the winners bracket match now that we are going to be playing out to find out who is going to the semi-finals on Sunday. Two very strong competitors, a relative newcomer, I suppose, at this point in Posesi, and a true newcomer in Bankyugi, only this being his first day of streamed games in Grandmasters for him. And so far, I think surprising us all with his off-meta but seemingly very powerful deck.
That's right. He has Highlander Mage and Galakrond Rogues, two archetypes that already existed prior to Scholomance Academy being released, but Bankyugi's put his own special spin on, I think, already a best moments contender in that finish that he had as Rogue versus Tyler a while ago.
And now a sight that we saw a lot last season, but maybe haven't seen quite so much here, in a Demon Hunter being banned away from Posesi. What's your take on getting rid of the control burst damage Demon Hunter?
Yeah, so Bankyugi, if we look at his ban history, a while ago, away warrior, and so that's already something that's different to what most people have been doing in banning away priest. But clearly, it's been working out for Bankyugi there. And if we look at the way this Demon Hunter from Posesi it's built, it's also very controlling and has similarities to warrior in what you might expect its matchup spread to be. So I think we already are starting to understand that Bankyugi does not want to face off against decks that can control board very easily. Demon Hunter also having many efficient removal tools, Blade Dance coming to mind for sure. And B can also deal a lot of non-minion based damage. From the warrior, it's bombs, and from this Demon Hunter, it's the weapon damage. So it could be that Bankyugi is feeling that the mage actually might struggle against these in particular.
I think very possibly, and I'd be very curious to hear Bankyugi's thought process with regards to the mage, because it hasn't been performing that well, and it's definitely not a common meta deck at all at this point. I wonder if he would have instead gone for maybe his own Demon Hunter, actually. I think would slot pretty well into this lineup of being fairly anti-aggro, but also being able to prey on some of these slower decks that don't have a strong win condition. Like Priest, for example, it could be a pretty good matchup against.
The funny thing is, looking at the way this Mage and Rogue are built, I feel like I can't even quite tell if they're meant to be anti-aggro yet, because the definition of aggro in this meta is still evolving a little bit. There's aggro in the form of, say, curving out like Paladin. There's aggro in the form of having a lot of burst damage to face, like Tempo Mage. So it could be that Bankyugi just went for what he believes are very all-around decks. Priest, I think, definitely comes to mind as one that doesn't have very polarizing matchups, whereas Druid, it feels like, is a bit more polarized in its matchup. So Bankyugi has notably omitted that from his lineup, whereas many other players are still running it.
That's true. And at the same time, we may be reading too much into Bankyugi's decks here. It could just be that he's going with the tried and true best deck strategy, but just has a very different perception of what the best decks are. These are just fairly strong decks, as we can see. The Rogue, while I haven't seen all too much of it in the Galakrond Rogue on ladder, clearly it has some ludicrously powerful combos that it can work out. And at the same time, the Warrior and the Priest are very much tried and true decks at this point in the metagame.
On the flip side, Posesi's strategy, it seems, now that we've seen it quite a few times, including Chonsu's lineup, which is similar in terms of archetype, we can kind of predict what it actually is positioned to do, whereas Druid and Priest are brought because these are some of the most consistently powerful decks in the meta, and Demon Hunter and Warrior, at least the control variants, are brought by Posesi because they seem to have pretty good matchups against these aggressive rogues that have been popping out in a bunch of these lineups, and also Tempo Mage. So I think in terms of meta read for this week at least, Posesi and Chonsu have been spot on. However, Bankyugi is the wild card in these lineups because the Mage and Rogue that he's running are not the Mage and Rogue that I think Posesi and Chonsu were most likely to see.
We'll have to see. I think it could be a struggling point for him up against Posesi's lineup. Maybe the Priest is the best way that he can try and get a hard target, or at the very least a medium target, with the Warrior, the Rogue. I've heard tell that Galakrond Rogue is very, very strong against these Galakrond Priests that Posesi has available. And the Mage, it can do powerful stuff. As much as or I at least have kind of been ragging on it in comparison to the Tempo Mage, it's still a powerful deck. It has the powerful combos.
Yes, indeed. And for the first matchup, it looks like we're going to be running up into it versus Mage game. So Posesi playing this Druid version, which is not running the exotic Mount Seller, I believe, but still has some different flavor in there. The double Oasis Surger and Rising Winds that we noted as uncommon in a while ago.
Yeah, it's a very, very weird build of the deck. Personally, I feel that it's a little bit too unreactive in the early game. You want at least a little bit of extra oomph to be able to survive that early game push from your opponent. I like having a Crystal Power or Moonfire, just something in the early game to fight back against the likes of Rogue and even development from Mage in the early game. Because if you're running Crystal Power, even if you don't have it in the early game, it means that the tempo mages are afraid to throw down their Sorcerer's Apprentices or whatever in the early game. You have that threat at the very least. But still, I think it could be a good deck still for Posesi, even with a weird build.
Yeah. I mean, we say it's weird because we expect to see a bunch of tempo mages, but particularly the Highlander mage, I think it's definitely a plus for Posesi that he's not running Crystal Power, which he might not have too many things to remove outside of just the one Solarian in the early game. And having Rising Winds in that slot to maybe make his card draw into ramp more consistent could definitely help him out here. And already that's looking like a spicy opener for Posesi.
But not too shabby on Bankyugi's side as well. Reno is a card I was talking about earlier, but with regards to the fact that I think it doesn't line up all too well at the moment. But one thing I will say is that against the stealth of the Twilight Runners that can come off Guardian Animals, that could definitely be a card that's worth thinking about holding on to purely to counteract that play from your opponent.
Yeah, I think it is definitely a consideration there, especially since when we're looking at things that Bankyugi would rather have, there are very few. Zephyrus, maybe Arcane Intellect, but as far as the early game is going, he already has Twilight Drake as a threatening minion on the 4-mana turn, and then it curves pretty well into Coin Reno if he needs to. So I like the mulligan.
I do as well. You want to be proactive, but you also want to be considering what your opponent can do and fighting back against that. And what your opponent can do is quite clearly here, ramp up to Ysera, and then with the overflow also ready to go, draw a whole bunch of cards. This is already a pretty tall order for Bankyugi to be able to survive.
And so if we were to break down this matchup in comparison to how the previous Highlander Mage versus Spell Druid matchup used to go, it seemed that Mage had several avenues as to how they would want to approach it. Either they could go for a long-term removal game plan, as far as people have seen them go as far as keeping Reno in the opener if they really feel that they need an answer to a Glowfly Soul of the Forest board. But there are also people that have approached it to just freezing and getting down cheated out Power Creation or Deep Freeze and just using that pressure against Druid. I feel that this it should still be similar, but the removal game plan will be harder for Mage now that Survival of the Fittest is added into the equation.
It will definitely be a little bit harder, I agree, but one thing that I've been trying to shift my perspective with regards to Druid is how quickly it does actually run out of stuff. What it does is very, very powerful, but it's kind of a flash in the pan. It doesn't have consistent ability to throw out threat after threat after threat. And if you're able to line up all the dragons in one board and then deal with that with the amazing Reno or a puzzle box, for example, then all of a sudden the Druid's really out of the majority of their threats.
Although it's worth noting Posesi's build is a little different. There's a double Oasis Surger, which become very threatening once the Survival of the Fittest comes down. Already for Posesi, it was an interesting turn. We could have seen him actually forego the immediate Guardian Animals if he wanted to survival before that, but I think that makes his game plan a little bit too slow altogether. I like that he played it immediately and then can curve into Ysera.
And now it's such a difficult impasse for Bankyugi. I was going to say, as I was talking about, Reno is there to be able to deal with the Twilight Runner that no other card can do. But if he goes for that, he's of course not going coin 8-drop into 8-drop or coin Amazing Reno later on in the game to survive. But now that he has the Devolving Missiles, I think he should just take his foot off the gas for a turn, hold off, and then go Reno next turn into double 8-drop thereafter.
Yeah, I completely agree. I confess I don't know what the spell damage on this does. I mean, the spell burst. But if it's threatening, Bankyugi can still deal if he wants with a Ray of Frost and Ping. I also agree that coining Reno there would have hurt his curve far too much for the long term.
Yeah, a Diligent Note Taker here is actually quite threatening, because where the spell burst is return the spell you played to your hand. And so being able to go Lightning Bloom, maybe getting another survival of the fittest if it survives for a turn or two, is a little scary.
Well, given that he did just see one played already, in terms... Oh my... However, this Guardian Animals is just gonna summon the one Teacher's Pet, I believe, because Posesi is not running Lake Thrasher. He has two Twilight, which were already pulled out, and the first Teacher's Pet is in hand.
And whether or not Bankyugi successfully spotted this, I think it has clearly worked out quite well for him, because this Diligent Note Taker is not doing anything at all for Posesi right now.
That's right. In terms of spells that he would be scared for Posesi to have an additional copy of, Guardian Animals is not one of them, actually, because all the beasts would have been pulled out by then. Survival of the Fittest was potentially scary, but on the 9-mana turn, Posesi would have had to have ramped first to get it, so best it could have returned was probably a Lightning Bloom.
Yeah, so I think it was a good spot by Bankyugi to leave it up.
Ray of Frost could be very crucial later on to help him survive into the Reno turn, but amazing Reno at least, because this one was a very straightforward Relicologist turn with the trade and board clear.
Yeah, it's really just how he wants to meter out the rest of his threats. That's the real question here, because there's two real avenues, right? He can go as quick as possible on the tempo right now with coin 8 into Alexstrasza, or he could save the coin, as you said, for the amazing Reno, if he wants to play more on the back foot, more defensively. My instinct says when you have the board control here and the dragons are in the deck, you've got to go as aggressive as possible to try and close out the game.
I tend to agree. Although this is also a crossroads for Posesi, because while the Survival of the Fittest looks like the gut instinct play, because it's on a curve, there's also room for potentially trying to draw out the dragons first and then going for the survival. But I feel that that is a conditional way to get it done, because if you pull out the dragons, that means Bankyugi has time to take trades. Pull out many dragons at once, it's very likely you just delay the survival by one turn.
Great mana utilization at all points for Bankyugi, and now the payoff of the coin comes down in huge fashion. What are we even looking at here?
Wow.
Eccentric Scribe? You're maybe running into board space issues?
I don't think missing on a couple 1/1s is a problem. The 6 attack looks nice, but I kind of value the Divine Shield on this Sunwalker as well. If he does expect some dragons to start coming down, then Divine Shield on this would be very awkward for Posesi to push through, and then he can protect the rest of his board.
It was close as anything. That 12 attack was very tempting to me on the Scribe, I've got to say. But you're right. Just the stickiest board, the hardest one to clear off, means that he should be able to follow up well enough with a Deep Freeze to close things out.
Posesi gonna go for the 12-mana turn, praying to fix his issues. And if he hits 3 of them, I think that's enough to put him in a favored spot. If it's less than that, I don't know. And granted, those 3 dragons, I would have assumed them to be at least 5/5s. The Twilight Drake is not the business.
Yeah, it's going to take a little bit more than that if he wants to be able to start wrestling back against this board.
He does have a lot of health to work with, and the Teacher's Pet is kind of sad to deal with.
Tough turn again now for Bankyugi, because these 9 health minions are so annoying to try and get through here. Does he have to leave the ping open and go for, like, Crimson Hothead?
I mean, my instinct was Deep Freeze first, but I do like the idea of removing that 4 damage essentially for free, especially since he can just freeze away the 8/9.
That's true.
With the Ray of Frost instead. The problem is, he has 3 things that he wants to ping, because on board, he has multiples of 4 damage.
Right. There is a copy of Blizzard in the deck, so the Tortollan Pilgrim could get a pretty fantastic outcome in that.
All right.
Okay.
Not sure of the odds of ripping that exactly, but given that he's already creation and deep freeze is in hand, I guess it was just that and box, and then the arcane breath left in deck.
It is really interesting how all the different 6-drops would have stacked up, because the spell damage would have been pretty good there to do 4 damage off the Blizzard. The extra attack on the Scribes would have been pretty powerful as well. A lot of different ways this game could have gone.
But Bankyugi is still in a very solid position here. Posesi only picking up 1 additional dragon. He's gonna fish for, I suppose, card draw from this nature studies.
Yeah, I guess you just go for the innovate because you kind of have the card draw with Rising Winds. You just want to get as much way to spend that mana as possible. Just going for a couple of beasts. I don't really see how that's going to be digging him out of this situation.
Yep. Don't see it either. For Posesi, I think that... Oh, okay, that's a big draw. Oasis, Surger, Buffalo. There's a couple 7/7 rushers.
That is huge. That is absolutely huge.
Filled with the Sunwalkers, and he picks up Varanus and another one.
These are dragons.
Yeah, this is the business for Posesi now. That's absolutely what he needed. I was about to say, even if he got a couple dragons but missed out on some removal, wasn't looking like he was in a good spot, but this is the perfect combination. We're seeing the strength of why he included Oasis Surger shine through.
Blizzard coming down as well, just naturally from the deck, is also a big deal here to buy him that turn, because now I think it's quite clear that it has to be an amazing Reno turn if he wants to be able to take the win.
Absolutely. Also a big deal that Posesi had a taunt to begin with, essentially healing him for 5 there. Because he not had a taunt and that 5 could have gone face, instead of Reno, Bankyugi could have just been looking at lethal for the follow-up.
So survival of the fittest is an interesting proposition here, because you are, I think, expecting your board to get cleared here, or at least you have to anticipate it as the only way for your opponent to stay in the game. And therefore, it's not buffing the dragons in your deck, right? It's still getting some niche benefit, or a pretty decent benefit, by buffing the minions in hand, but it could have got a lot more value later on.
It could have, but at the same time, if you're not playing that, you're playing absolutely nothing, right? If you're expecting Reno to come down the next turn, if you go for card draw, you might not get the dragons. Wow, he even commits the Anubis. That I am surprised by.
Because if it's not Reno, you've won. It has to be the Amazing Reno, or I guess Puzzle Box. Even if you don't have the extra Anubis Defender, I find that just a little bit of an overcommittal, I've got to say.
I agree. And as far as remaining dragons, there's what, 3 left?
Yeah.
Alright. Okay.
Pretty good one.
In fact, I don't know the name of that, but it's going to generate some more probably useful thing for Posesi, or he needs them to be useful, because this is the last wave of threats, essentially.
Yeah, you'll definitely have to take an extra couple of Druid cards there.
Oh, the Guardian Atlas does nothing!
And this is another weird problem, is that like the partner assignment, even though I thought it was a somewhat weird choice at the time, is clearly quite a lot better here than an Innovate turned out to be. But it doesn't get the buff of the survival of the fittest, whereas if he'd waited another turn, he could have got that down. Yes, he would have had a 10-mana card that he'd have to find the time to play. But I'm still skeptical of Posesi's play the last turn, where he massively overcommitted and also used a pretty useful card in the survival of the fittest.
Mind the survival on the turn that he did play it, but I really found the Anubis Soth that turn weird. It seemed like too much commitment. Because on average, I suppose you can expect the dragons to come out to have around this much attack, 4 and 5.
Yeah.
And if those manage to stick 2 turns, that's pretty much lethal if you get 4 of them
fair.
anyway.
I see your point.
Maybe he was hoping to buff his board out of the range of some type of generation into Flame Strike. I'm reaching a bit.
Well, there is Malagos's Flame Strike, talking of.
Bankyugi's in some trouble. After that Reno was expended, he doesn't have the answer for the next wave quite yet. 15 cards in deck. Pretty big ask to look for Puzzle Box at this point.
Yeah, I think I disagree with his targeting there from Bankyugi of the spell, because he could have board locked his opponent if he'd found Frost Nova, which is really what he was expecting to find as his only real chance of locking down the board. It's close, it's close. I guess this is pretty decent without the Frost Nova.
He, I guess, valued guaranteed saving 3 HP more than potentially generating freezes. I think at this point, Bankyugi, even a Nova isn't quite enough for him here because he can't play anything threatening alongside a generated Nova. What he needs is Box.
He needs Box, and
or
he needs
actually, this Flame Strike Flame Ward is
11.
A little bit short of dealing with the Teacher's Pet. Wait, that's
Pretty
a
good.
nutty freeze.
Yeah, that's insane.
So that now means he can go for the Flame Strike Flame Ward setup, and Posesi can only get in.
No, he'd be dead.
Yeah, it's exactly 23, right?
Yeah, exactly.
As long as he attacks first with the 11-11. Oh my gosh.
So he has to go Alex Straza, I think, here to survive.
Or hope that Posesi screws up. It looks like that's what he's going for.
Sure, yes. I guess that is something to consider.
But yeah, as long as Posesi attacks first with the 11-3, the damage will go face first. And then the Flame Ward goes. All the small guys die off, but 12 attack still survives.
Right.
23, and the hero power closes it out for 24. Posesi looks stressed. Does he see it?
Well, Vaporize is something to consider, right? Because if you attack with the 11-3, you don't have lethal if it's Vaporize.
Okay.
But by healing up first, you can play around that, right?
Yes.
Very smart line.
Posesi had all his bases covered.
Very nicely done. 1-0 start now for Posesi, moving in ahead with the Druid over the Mage. It was close there for Bankyugi. It felt like he was almost able to have enough removal to clear off all the threats. Just one extra big board clear, and he may have been able to get there. But for Posesi, what to me that was a real story of the power of the Oasis Surges. They were huge in that match.
Yeah, it mattered so much that he was able to remove that extra 8 damage because, as we were talking about, Bankyugi at several points there was looking like he could turn the table and be the aggressor if he just managed to pick up more freeze effect, be it from his Malagos or Zephyrus, etc. It just turned out, though, that the Oasis Surger, 1 for Posesi, acted as defense, and 2 as offense because they just have 7 attack after a survival goes off.
That is exactly right. And so even though it is a weird build of the deck, it's working very well for Posesi with the Druid out of the way. Now he's going to be lining up the Warrior. This was the deck as well that Bankyugi banned in his previous series against Tyler. Clearly doesn't want to be up against this, but is even more afraid of the Demon Hunter than he is of the Bomb Warrior. And I've got to say, even though there is potential, of course, for the Mage for the Mage to go for an aggressive approach, try and get all the damage through in the mid game without the Warrior removing. I've got to say, I'm thinking the Warrior is going to have all the removal it needs, and more importantly, all the bombs that it could possibly ask for, and the Mage is just going to be dying to that.
Yeah, the bombs are especially problematic because they mess with Zephyrus and Reno the Relicologist activating, but I think that Mage has a solid shot in the matchup. It generally depends on getting down an early Zephyrus and going for ramp, but once they can start rolling into the Power of Creation turns, Tortola and Pilgrim, etc., I think those are particularly difficult for Warrior to deal with.
Yeah.
And as far as Bankyugi's been piloting the Mage so far, I think he has a very solid understanding of all of its matchups. I would be curious to see how his mulligan goes. For example, Arcane Intellect, I
Mm.
feel, is not a keep in most matchups, but in the slower one, the card draw might be crucial.
It's tough, right? Because then I agree with your point in principle, but then that's another card that isn't Zephyrus that could give you wild growth. But then maybe you don't want Zephyrus that desperately at the start for wild growth. Maybe you want it for weapon destruction in order to clear off the weapons. Maybe you want it for Tyrion. Maybe you want it for burst damage. So many different ways that you can approach the matchup.
What's shocking to me is he even keeps Arcane Breath alongside it. One, because he didn't have a dragon in hand, so it's surprising to me, and two, because his warrior is not really playing threats that get dealt with by the Arcane Breath that early on.
Yeah, I also find that somewhat intriguing. I guess the idea being that he could discover something that he really wants in the mid-game, but at the same time, there aren't that many proactive Mage spells, mainly removal, of course, that Mage relies on, and the secrets, which were a little bit underwhelming. So I agree. I was much more looking at going for hard mulligan for Astromancer Solarian, Zephyrus, any kind of mid-game push that you can make to lock down the early game.
Mana Saber would be on my list as well. It's pseudo ramp, and he does get it, but it's becoming a curve where it looks like Jandis just wants to come down, so I wonder if he would save the Mana Saber, at least unstealthing itself for a little bit later. Or skipping on the ping for turn 2 because he doesn't want to activate his SE's Battle Rage even further.
But it's starting to come together now for Bankyugi. There's a curve shaping up here quite nicely in the form of Mana Saber, Jandis, and then I guess maybe you leave it stealth for a turn so you can guarantee yourself the C amount on turn 6.
Definitely what I'm looking at. For Posesi though, the card draw has been pretty smooth so far. Taking a quick look to see how many pirates he's running. Raiders, 2 skippers. Some people are running Horde Pillager, but it's not available. Or
yeah, well, there's the
3 skippers he's running.
The third
Never
skipper,
mind.
exactly, yeah.
Well, there's a dragon right on time if Posesi wants to play that Arcane Breath.
Sure. Probably Counterspell is what I'm looking at. Or actually, maybe Spellbender, because there are a few targeted spells in the Warrior deck, right? So maybe you can just snipe off an important Shield Slam.
Yeah, I can see that. Counterspell definitely could get rid of something more crucial, but he'll have to wait for the coin to be played before he gets that down, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, Counterspell can just be an umbrella to protect all your minions against the wide AoE from Warrior. That's the dream. It's unlikely to come down in that way, but if Bankyugi can time it well enough, it could be his trump card.
What now?
And for Posesi, his hand is lots of cycle, and he wants to make space for the cycle, but it doesn't look like there's enough mana to make a really good risky skipper turn come to fruition just yet. I wonder if we're looking at just a tempo armor smith to get it out of hand, and just because he doesn't necessarily need to value health total as much against Mage than Mardex.
Just taking it very slow here is Posesi. It's a far cry from what we saw in the matchup between Tyler and Bankyugi with Warrior against the Priest. Obviously a somewhat different matchup, of course. But still just showing a much more reserved, slow game plan rather than the lightning-fast approach we had before.
And he does end up dumping something, but it's the skipper instead of the armor smith. And looking at the hand again, when you have 3 skippers, it probably feels like the third one is not going to get very much done, whereas armor smith paired with skipper, it's the classic armor smith to skipper ratio that Posesi's trying to preserve here.
Yeah,
As for Bankyugi, this looks like it could be a pretty decent Jandis turn, even though it's off curve. Quite a lot of pressure. If he just goes for the hot head, suddenly Bladestorm is looking kind of dicey.
He's already seen one Bladestorm at this point. I think it's worth considering for sure, but for the main point, it's just playing the biggest thing he can every turn.
Isn't Jandis bigger a lot of the time?
Yes, but it's significantly more vulnerable to risky skipper, right? I think that's one that he may just not really play for the
Sure.
longest time. But yes, I should clarify. The biggest good minion he can play each turn.
Well, Posesi can turn this into another skipper turn if he wants. He's drawn all of the cycle part of his deck and none of the threatening part outside of, I guess, the Blood Boil Brute. Whereas I think he would have much rather have seen bombs around now.
It's a good point you bring up. He can draw to that, of course, now, which is what he's going to be doing here with the Battle Rage.
Yeah, it's a bit awkward that he's not able to fit in the Blood Boil Brute, but he is valuing the card draw. Make sure he can get Wrench Caliber online.
And there it is, all starting to come together at last. Wrench Caliber, Dr. Boom, he can start making his own pushes back onto the board.
I've been looking so stressed last game and this one. I think he played last game pretty spot on. And speaking of spot on, curve maintained for Bankyugi here. We could just see Siamat win Fury Rush.
I mean, I kind of agree with you, and I think it's a good thing to bring up about Posesi, is that he has been playing, over the past season, tremendous Hearthstone. Definitely one of the best players that we have here in Asia Pacific, also when you take into account his Masters Tour performances. But he kind of always looks a little bit unsure of himself, unless he's very, very certain with the lines he needs to be taking. And I think based on last game and this game, he feels a little bit less solid on the decks than what we've seen from previous metagames. I don't think he's a player who likes going for the experimentation, just trying to rely on his fundamentals. He feels like a player who likes to grind out the decks and make sure that he knows all the different situations you need to be playing around.
Definitely agree with that. Bankyugi, though, that turn was pretty difficult, I have to say. At first glance, I just wanted to play the card on curve, but Tiamat probably gets a lot better than that. After he started the turn with Combustion, it was a spot to maybe preemptively play Doomsayer to potentially give him a Tiamat this turn, uncontested. In the end, he just went for Combustion and a usage of mana. I don't know if Sightless Watch, Imprisoned Observer is getting very much done at this point.
Interesting. Ooh.
Oh, you can pick up 2 mana worms.
That's pretty
Very
good,
cute.
right? Yeah, just play the counter spell.
Well, it's pretty much Brawl Bait, but he can play Counterspell as the Spell Burst one.
That's a pretty sick combo.
I like that.
I mean, yeah, I think you choose the Worm Weaver as the weak one, and then just get the benefit, get those worms out of there.
Very sick. Posesi does not... Oh, okay, there's an activation for Counterspell. That's a huge, huge draw.
So you test for Ice Barrier first, just to rule one out. If that's always happening, then you're like, okay, I've still got the answers that I need to be going for here, should I need it.
Yep.
I mean, if he wants to, he doesn't even have to go for a spell-based removal here. It could just be, obviously, Skipper plus Lord Barov. I haven't figured out where I want to put the emphasis in that word yet.
I've been saying
Barov. Sounds like I'm saying Lord Bruv. I'm too English here.
Whoa, starting with Brawl, though. That I did not expect. But Posesi could just be saying, this is fine. You have a full board. I'm at 40, but honestly, that looked very fishy to me.
That looked really fishy. I mean, didn't you just want to go for the guaranteed clear? There's nothing that can go wrong with Bruv clear.
Nothing at all, bruv. But Posesi looked strangely unfrazzled by the outcome there compared to how stressed he looked in the other one. So based on watching his expression, I feel like he was fine with this pan out. It's just so strange to me, though. And Bankyugi is using these Rays of Frost as +4 damage.
Yeah, also freeing up some space to get down Siamat. He has seen his opportunity and he is seizing it.
And Posesi's like, yes, you walked into my trap, bruv.
In it.
The
You're in it
second
now.
brawl will make quick work of this board, and no matter what minion remains, Blade Storm is available. Or he could just go for the Skipper Bruv. That's it. I'm just never calling it anything but Lord Bruv now.
It's Lord Bruv forever.
Oh my gosh,
Well,
the Kel'Thuzad.
Yeah,
The
Kel'Thuzad.
Kel'Thuzad!
What?
But you can't
Blade
get through the
Storm?
Tiamat then, right? No, I was looking at Barov, Skipper, Kel'Thuzad, but then the Tiamat survives. So it's probably just Pearl.
Right.
Would have been sick though, but I don't think Posesi's supposed to take 12 there.
No. Yeah, I mean, he has to clear off the board there 100%. It's just how he wanted to go about it that was the interesting part.
And for the remaining mana, probably just the Quartermaster and the comes off it. I don't feel like a 3/6 warrants a Blade Storm. Still relatively healthy for Posesi. Okay, you could go Skipper, Quartermaster, clear it off. If the inter for Jandis is you remove one of the minions but not by damaging it, are you able to see?
No, because it wouldn't have the effect, right? I mean, I think you can make an educated guess there for sure.
Yeah.
So it's an unthreatening board here, relatively speaking, so Reno is somewhat disincentivized because of that, but at the same time, getting down these random spells that can happen every turn is very much something to consider strongly here, because a single powerful spell, if you can just spike one of those outcomes, you could just be putting yourself in a winning situation immediately.
But what about 10 random spells right now, Dara? I feel like this is close to situation with a board that's not so threatening if it gets left up, but pretty reasonably light does get cleared up, and he has space in hand to draw cards, and space on board to generate things.
I mean, you are right and wrong at the same time, because that explanation implied there is a board where you don't want to play Puzzle Box, which is incorrect. It is every board is a good box.
Well, this one is close to an ideal one, I want to say.
Sure.
Especially since the poof is very useful to deal with Boombots.
Yes, that is another really good point, and one that Posesi is clearly picking up on as well, with his just slamming down of Dr. Boom here at the first opportunity after Reno's hit the board. Yes.
And in terms of stalling out, we could see Bankyugi go for Nova Doom Barrier. That's a little bit scary because once the boombots go off, they're all gonna hit his face, assuming the Doomsayer even does go off. But it does look like Bankyugi is very conservative with his box usage, given the order of how he played Reno before. So it's consistent at the very least that he's holding onto it for even longer.
It's been a weird game all around. Like, obviously from Posesi there was the turn where he got the Brawl counterspelled, which was, you know, we can go back and forth on, but I think was probably just not optimal way to go about things at all. Whereas Bankyugi, his development of threats has also been somewhat sporadic, and I can't quite find the train of thought that's carrying through all his decisions to make a cohesive game plan.
Yeah, neither can I. There's room for something very fun here. Headmaster, Blade Storm, and then you immediately resummon a bunch of boombots.
I was thinking the same thing. It's tempting for sure.
Yeah. Well, Posesi is just gonna go for presumably Sword and Board to deal with the Doomsayer instead. Crucially, he hadn't tested for Spellbender at that point. But I guess it was quite... Oh no! What is that outcome? I got a bunch of 3/3s. That's insane.
Wow!
Both
that is
of
insane.
them with visible, huge reactions. Cycle of Hatred mana Demon Hunter card that does 3 damage AoE, and for every minion you kill, you summon a 3/3.
I mean, this was one of the cards in the Demon Hunter reviews that people were saying, it's a strong card. You want to play this card, but it just doesn't fit in any archetype right now. And when you get it off of Reno's What Does This Do? I'll tell you what it does. It makes you win games.
But Bankyugi is not able to rush these out. He's staring down lethal on the other side. Alexstrasza not active because of the bomb. So he still had for some randomly generated outcome to pull him out of this situation. But he has 3 options for the generated outcome. Okay, Sunwalker, have at it.
Huge. That is a huge outcome there.
And this is 1 mana short of being the coolest Kel'Thuzad turn ever.
Yeah. I mean, it's still pretty insane, right? Just going for a Bladestorm here with the Kel'Thuzad is ludicrously strong.
That's right. It doesn't let him push any damage face, but neither does the other line. And he can trade off the Mega Wind Fury guy first. And then the Bladestorm leaves his boom at 1 HP. And then the boom can trade off the other Sunwalker.
I mean, this way it's the same thing, but he just gets back another 6/6, right?
Right, yeah. Much better.
Oh! What?
Hello?
What?
Hello?
Bankyugi, you are a god. Undisputed.
You can't believe it either. What's happening?
In my hands.
Silgrim, that's a lot of bombs to choose from. The Deep Freeze, you'll take those.
Yes.
Guaranteed to freeze an enemy, 50-50 to hit the good target, because of course you do, if you're Bankyugi.
Yeah, it was a little bit scary outside of that, but it's looking much, much safer now. And I guess, of course, he had the secret in play of Ice Barrier, so he wasn't really in too much danger of dying on that turn, at least.
The heck was this game? But it's not over. There's bombs left in Bankyugi's deck, and that slipped my mind. That must be why he's holding onto the puzzle box for so long. He doesn't want to potentially generate card draw.
I mean, you gotta feel for Posesi. Yeah, I think he's very possibly still winning this game. It's not like he's out of the equation at all, but just those outcomes are so demoralizing.
I know. They really are. And yet, Posesi, when those crazy randomly generated outcomes happen, he just kind of looked amused based on his expression, versus on his own turns when he's playing pretty well, I have to say. He looked frazzled.
I mean, I think based on what we've seen from Bankyugi, this is a tame game of Hearthstone by comparison to what probably happens. This is just another day at the office for this man.
He's going to stave off as much damage as he can. Just wait for the bombs to go off. It's a pretty good outcome as well.
Not
I guess
bad.
not particularly relevant on this board.
Zephyrus, of course, sadly shut off due to the bombs. This is one of the interactions that people were talking about when Highlander decks were first coming around with Saviors of Uldum, is people were saying, nah, Bomb Warrior is too powerful. These Highlander decks are never going to see play. They were wrong, obviously. But it still is an interaction that you have to be careful of.
And it's now just 22 for Bankyugi because the only way to deal with both of these minions is to play box, but the box potentially draws him a bunch of bombs. It might just be time to put
yeah,
in the box. Okay,
Not
the
the best first
overload
one.
is pretty gross because he has some 9 cost cards for next turn.
Okay, just kind of gained 2 armor in a very roundabout way there.
Okay. 2 Hellfires absolutely melting that water elemental. But no cards drawn. All things considered, not a terrible outcome for Bankyugi.
Not the worst, not the worst.
Thus he has to be wary for it.
Yeah, you're throwing that one down and hoping that it can connect face for the win on the next couple of turns.
What? So much value!
Oh, freezing trap!
Wait.
That's insane!
Hello?
I mean, Stormhammer is also insane with the dragons as well.
And Bankyugi knows one of the two remaining cards in Posesi's hand is Lord Barov. So, hang on. If he goes his Barov and then Wild Bloodstinger and it hits the other Barov, that clears the Deathwing.
You are not
it's not
incorrect. Next turn, that's something to look forward to, I guess. Man, what a silly game.
Absolutely ludicrous. Is Bankyugi just gonna win in fatigue? Is that what's happening here?
Surely not. It's like, I mean, it's Wrench Caliber is the last card, and then it's like Corsair caches are left, right? Like, it's not good cards that he's got left over.
Will break your
There's no way Bankyugi can dodge bombs for that long. Posesi's 26. Bankyugi does not have any burst just yet. He has this Alex though, so if Posesi leaves Bankyugi at an awkward health total, then potentially he could just save himself from the brink of death.
Yikes.
How many bombs have we even seen go off by this point?
I think none, right? There's
I'm gonna go out on a limb and say there's around 5 in the deck.
Really?
I was not counting well enough.
I thought there was
What's your
less than that,
estimate?
right? 3, right? Because he's only played one Wrench Caliber and swung twice with that, and then once with this one. I think.
Oh, did it not get the Corsair buff?
Maybe.
Then it's much less than that. But still enough to close out the game if they're drawn anytime soon.
Indeed.
The Wild Bloodstinger is not looking good anymore because he knows the Deathwing is in hand.
Yeah.
Freezes are a little bit late because the last swing of... Oh, wait. He's able to freeze the face right now, obviously.
Yeah.
Freeze can target, and that is a very big deal.
So clear available, obviously, with Barov and Kobold Lackey targeting your own Barov. A little bit funky.
What about just Deathwing?
Or just Deathwing also does it. I mean, like, it freezes your own Deathwing, right? So it's not perfect, but yeah, it clears the board is the important thing.
The thing is, Posesi's on his last card in the deck. Barov is quite possibly a precious resource at this point, because if Bankyugi's left with a single bomb left in the deck, then Zephyrus, Alex draws are active. What is this Reno? These outcomes have been insane for Bankyugi.
Yeah, he's been fine-tuning his Gatling wand there.
What would make us rich?
I bring life.
Heal up for 6 right now.
Yeah, and
Got
get
an
another
8/8
swing
on
in.
the board, sure.
Cards.
I just cannot believe the way this game has gone. Last card is pretty irrelevant for Posesi. And Bankyugi knows that Barov, Lackey, and Battle Rage are the last cards. The Wild Bloodstinger is guaranteed to get a good target.
School Spirits is pretty decent, right? For a couple of extra good cards shuffled in.
Sure.
With the Soul Fragments.
I mean, it's the Soulfire I'm looking at to just shoot away that death. It's huge.
Yeah,
Needs
yeah.
the Alex, doesn't need to go in. He can reduce Posesi's clock even further.
That's just a 6-mana 6/8 there that also deleted a card from Posesi's hand.
I mean, Posesi, his only out now is 3 bombs off the top, right?
Yep.
And he has to swing fist. He's dead next turn because of fatigue and the Stormhammer charges.
And this is kind of the problem with Posesi's deck. The fact that it doesn't have the Horde Pillager in there means that he is obviously still reliant on the bomb strategy, but it's a lot less consistent of a strategy.
I mean, to be completely fair, Posesi looked like he was very far ahead in this game for the vast majority of it, but
Yeah.
certain Reno and box outcomes have been really, really crazy here.
That is also correct.
Last hope is these bombs. Posesi has roughly 2 turns to get there, including this one.
Okay.
Okay, that's pretty good.
Pretty good for Posesi. He'll take that. That might buy him another turn.
And if you're Bankyugi, the only way you lose now is all the bombs off the top. And this is another probability question.
Is it worth playing the Solarium? What if it draws cards?
Yeah, I was gonna say Arcane Intellect. Oh my.
Oh! Oh my god! What? What?
I can't watch. I can't watch. I was just looking at Alex
That's a card.
set up a 2-turn. Isn't that what? What's happening? What's happening?
He's safe. He made it through.
But there's one more draw after this.
There's one last turn. Double bomb, now or never.
Posesi rubs his hands together. But there's 2 soul shards in there, and that's not the bomb. Oh my god, what a grueling game.
Crazy stuff there, and Posesi gave it absolutely everything he could, but for Bankyugi, that is a big victory there. I think the Mage could have been the struggling point for him. Obviously, it can suffer against these somewhat slow control decks that have strong win conditions for the Warrior, but I think they're the real downfall for Posesi, other than, of course, stuff that you can't control, like all the Reno outcomes not going his way. The big thing is that I think his list is just a little bit too anti-aggro to be taking on the likes of Reno Mage, which is not to say that it's a bad bring this week, because it has been fairly aggressive overall, but you have to accept that when you're not including the extra win con cards in the control matchups, you're going to lose some points there.
Extra win cons being Rattlegore mainly, although against Mage it's a shaky proposition because they can generate silence effects or polymorph. But yeah, it is definitely worth noting. I have to say, hats off to Posesi for playing that as best he could. I think despite all of the very possibly tilting outcomes that happened, he still found the best lines towards the ends of the game there. And I mean, he kind of knew how high he was rolling towards the end there, but that's just Hearthstone at sometimes. And if you just make the best of what you can with what you're given all the time, then at some point it's going to even out.
Yeah, I mean, I see your point. Like, I think there were a couple of points where I disagreed from both players. Like, obviously, there was the Brawl turn where Posesi chunked a whole lot of damage when it wasn't really necessary for him to do so. And then on Bankyugi's side of the board, even just playing Prime there at the end, as much as we loved watching it, that was way closer than I think it had any right to be at the end.
Yeah, it was an interesting probability question again because he had 3 options, I believe, but the Prime, which he went for, Soul Fragments plus another minion, or it was just Soul Fragments and then Alex the next turn, or just Alex that turn. Because obviously the Soul shot him more chances to not draw the bomb, but the Alex that turn would have guaranteed a 2-turn lethal. And he went for the one with the largest margin for error, I believe. And I don't know if that's a bit of fatigue one, but one thing I have to say is that this entire series has been blowing my mind so far.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun to watch Bankyugi with his Mage deck, as nonsense as it is. It's very similar to the versions that we had before the most recent expansion. But now we're going to be getting to see his Warrior in action, and also for me the real highlight, the Rogue. I absolutely love what he's done here with this deck. I think he has found, as we saw perfectly demonstrated against Tyler, just a very, very strong thing you can do. I was skeptical at first of his list because I was thinking, oh, you really want the questing adventurers in there. It's great against Druid. It can be great against basically any deck that doesn't run lots of hard removal. But his plan to go for Lawkeeper, Polkelt, get those expensive cards in deck, and then produce them all with the power of Togwaggle, his Wondrous Wand, and Galakrond as well, is, I think, a great idea for a deck, and it's working out well.
Yeah, could very well be his ace in the hole remaining. But bear in mind, Posesi has that priest remaining, which is the class that's probably most notorious in the meta at the moment for having very few counters and very flexible ways of getting the win there. It looks like the next matchup, Posesi has queued up that priest, but we're still waiting on Bankyugi's choice of deck. Between warrior and rogue, though, definitely have to say that the rogue looks like it has a stronger shot.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with you there. The priest, we've heard tell on social media, Casey, a European Grandmaster, going so far as to say that Galakrond Rogue can only lose to Galakrond Priest if it disconnects. It's that favored in the matchup, despite the fact that he only had a 70% win rate, which, I mean, I say only. It's obviously a very, very favored matchup at that point. But it's just I think, good overall inclusion for Bankyugi, especially up against the likes of Posesi with his slower controlling line.
Week at that particular build from Posesi, he is running Galakrond full on Invoke package and no Highlander cards here, which I suppose makes the deck a bit more consistent in terms of curving out, but it gives you less options for stealing things from your opponent, no Thought Steal in there, and also no Plague of Death for the top end, which can be a panic button a lot of the time for these priests. The inclusion of Wandmaker is one that I find particularly interesting here, given that you can more renews, which cycle into other spells. It looks like a great way of continuing a value engine.
Yeah, I like it a lot. It's being able to... It's the fact that there's a relatively small suite of priest spells, right? It's kind of like when we were seeing players go for the Spellkin, the Cobalt Spellkin in Demon Hunter at the end of last expansion. Alutemo, I remember in particular, at the most recent Masters Tour Asia Pacific Online, was bringing that card, the Cobalt Spellkin, because there were so few one-cost spells in Demon Hunter. It was just getting you so consistently a Twin Slice to be able to get extra damage against your opponent. I think I heard that we were going to have to go to a break there.
Yes,
at this
I
point.
did hear that as well.
Right. Yes, so without any further ado, I'm going to go and sort my ears out so I can hear properly and do my job. And we're also going to let the players get ready to line up their next game and do whatever they need to do beforehand. So we're going to go to a quick break before we come back with the conclusion of our next series here at Masters Tour APAC Online. Or at Grandmasters. I got that in my head. Here in Hearthstone. Welcome back, everyone. I have demelted my brain at this point, hopefully just a little bit, and we're ready to continue our series between Posesi and Bankyugi. Once again, we are seeing some pretty crazy creative lineups from Bankyugi, which does generally happen when we get a player from one of the less represented countries, generally have their own practice groups, especially from Thailand in particular, which is not a country that is especially well known for dominance in Hearthstone, I think it's fair to say. But so far, Bankyugi, with an incredibly strong performance against Tyler, even just getting to this point at all, has already put a strong check next to his name.
And up for the next matchup is the deck that you and I were very, very happy to see in its spectacular combination with Lord Cooper Polkelt at the end of the match versus Tyler. It is now this Galakrond Rogue. And you know what? Aside from that Polkelt, there's also another inclusion that I kind of glossed over in this list. There's a Potion of Illusion in here that allows him to even get more value off of Galakrond, Krunks, for example.
I mean, that can be absolutely ludicrous. If you're going for the kind of play of Wand, and then you play a bunch of 0-mana guys, and then you get back a 1-mana Togwaggle with the Potion of Illusion, a 1-mana Kronks, you can just blow out any competition with that. But before we get to that late stage of the game, we first of all have to see Bankyugi survive the early game from Posesi, which is looking incredibly aggressive. This is a dominant starting hand for Posesi.
That's right. Usually when we talk about the value explosion in the late game and just having to stave off the aggression in the early game, usually that's from the perspective of the priest. But tables have been turned a little bit now. Posesi's list in particular, not a Highlander card, so he doesn't have the Alexstrasza at the top end, for example, but he does have a more consistent way of playing threats every single. And Bankyugi's list, which is quite greedy at the top end, might struggle just a little bit.
Classic question that you seem to end up a lot in at the moment when you have 1-2 facing 1-2, and you need to decide, hey, do I ping it? Do I hero power it? Obviously, with the rogue, you're looking at daggering it to clear it off, to play around any kind of buff. But I think given that it's turn 2, and if Coin Apotheosis is the scariest thing that they can do, which is now available, I like just getting the minions down and tempoing onto the board.
I like Dagger because Apotheosis does look scary to me here. I mean, if it comes down now, trades the Cattling with the resulting 3/3.
I must consider.
That's fair. That's fair. I guess you're not able to clear it off immediately, right?
However, for Posesi, Coin Apotheosis does wreck his curve a little bit. The one does make it so that he'll have a 1-cost spell to play on the next turn, but it's not necessarily something that he wants to play immediately. If he gets Wave of Apathy, you'd rather save that, especially since he has this Cabal Acolyte. And that in itself being another reason to hold on to Coin. But ultimately, I think the board position he gets from this is 2-up, because the damage minion, sorry, 3/4 at the end of this can't be good, can't be backstabbed.
Okay, I will concede this point. I can see why it may have been better to go for the dagger there for Bankyugi. But the benefit is, if you want to look at it in a different way, that he now has stuff on board. He has powerful minions on the board that he can just keep throwing out, especially with the second Grandmummy. And he should be able to clear off this Apotheosis minion, I think, fairly easily over the next few turns.
Yeah, that could very well be the case. Posesi could just go for a trade and heal on this, but Wand Maker, if you hit Renew, that actually just allows you to heal that back up anyway. He hits Draconic Studies. Fairy Dragon, I just like taking the cheapest thing available, but he says he wants the thing that I don't know the name of. Dang it, Posesi!
Oh, what, the Proto Drake? It's very powerful. For like 3 games, I was running this in my Malagos Druid because I needed an extra dragon, and I was like, oh, that's pretty good. Maybe I can just dump that down. It wasn't very good, but just because it was too slow. When you can get it down, it's a very powerful card.
We're seeing a very cute interaction of the Grandmummies just passing the buffs along to each other. And he can end the turn with a cleared board if he wants to expend the backstab. Having seen one Apotheosis, you would think that the threat of a single minion is lessened, but every single value trade that Bankyugi allows Posesi to give, I feel, is warranting a backstab.
And it just comes together so beautifully here, doesn't it? With the Raised Dead to activate the Spell Burst, getting the steal here. very, very easily keeping up in the lead in terms of tempo here is Posesi. And so this is where I think Bankyugi needs to start activating some of the power mid to late game parts of his deck.
Yet it's not quite coming together. He hasn't hit much of any invokes. He has not hit Togwaggle. He does have a way to spend his mana this turn, but Hanara is definitely a card that feels like it's good at stalling versus much smaller boards.
Mm. And while this is powerful to an extent, what Bankyugi is doing, and Plagiarize is a pretty nice card to get,
Yeah.
it's still kind of scary, the things he's running into, because Posesi still has the ability to steal these boards, just keep ahead. And Bankyugi is not really getting any closer to his actual win condition quite yet.
It is very much just stall. Plagiarize potentially could pick up Bankyugi invoke cards from Posesi's side if he's not very careful, and that could be huge because the Galakron's already in hand for Bankyugi.
You fell right into my trap.
Another Draconic Study is available for Posesi, so going with that, he can just discount the Proto Drake down to 6 if he wants to play it next turn.
Mm-hmm. I liked the idea of going for it this way because it was, on average, I think a pretty nice clear, but he had worked through a fair few of the Paladin secrets at that point already, like we said.
All in all, it's not a huge deal. Posesi is very comfortably at 26, only is staring down a Grand Mummy.
I never lie, but I never tell the truth.
Interesting. It's not often that you see people deviate away from just Paladin 2-cost, Paladin 2-cost, Paladin 2-cost, wherever possible on the secrets. But Spellbender here is actually just pretty insane. It's difficult for the priest to activate it without losing one of their buffs.
Yeah, buff or even targeted removal, which could protect one of his more threatening minions, particularly the Hanar. I like the pick of Spellbender. I'm just really curious if Posesi will have Plagiarize on his mind as he goes about this next turn. Because if you're playing around certain mage spells, then you might deviate away from playing your own spells. And if you deviate from playing spells, you're likely to play minions, and the minions he has can give invokes to Bankyugi.
That is true, because, I mean, a very understandable, reasonable play would just be Disciple plus Shield.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, Bankyugi's Galakron is looking fantastic.
I think I'm starting to get into this bit of whenever seeing Bankyugi, just look for the coolest possible. And then just hope that that's going to be the play.
Yeah, Bankyugi is too busy thinking about whether or not he could, not whether or not he should.
What's fun, though, is because Bankyugi will get copies of this Cabal Acolyte and Renew back in his hand, or rather Draconic Studies and possibly Renew as well, then the Hanar is just going to be playing both sides back and forth. Or possibly he could steal the 2/6 and then I guess the Disciple now that it's been played too. What's yours is mine.
Ooh, that's a Galakron that's starting to get juiced up pretty nicely for Bankyugi. Just needs to make sure he doesn't lose board too heavily over the next few turns, which this does accomplish very well.
Yeah, definitely like the play from Bankyugi. He gives himself the best odds of getting back his Hanar, and if he doesn't, he at least ends up with a well-statted minion. Hanar has been doing quite a bit.
I mean, this is like a really terrible soap opera where every episode Hanar's like, no, I betrayed you, and now I betrayed you. Although having said that, I would watch that show.
Absolutely. I love trash TV. Well, for Posesi, since he doesn't appear to have a good way of dealing with the Hanar, He could just start by fishing, and even if it misses, he could just develop that Proto Drake. It looks like he's going for the Sethic Train instead. Not a very consequential spellbender, all things considered.
It's interesting, right? Because that was a big turn of development that he just missed out on.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of reasons, obviously, to not go for the Plagued Proto Drake, because they can sap it back to your hand, being the main one. But I think that was a decent opportunity to just kind of take the risk, right? Are you just not going to play them for the entire game?
Well, given that he wanted to play Renew immediately, I guess Posesi was banking on playing Apotheosis as well. Fire was a huge outcome. I'm also not sure why he held back on the guarantee minion and then just prioritize generation instead. But the fact that he got Plague of Death at least means that he would probably deviate to more of a defensive game plan and set up for that, and then probably that's when he's hoping to play these Drakes. This Hanar is just immortal. It's seen both sides of the war and still continues.
You don't pick the one.
It's not going to be stopping anytime soon, it looks like. I guess until Plague of Death comes down on turn 9, but by that point, it's pretty possible that Bankyugi will have generated a counterspell, which would be insane going into that.
Bankyugi's also drawn his Potion of Illusion now. While Flick does seem like a great target to copy the rest of the minions, maybe not so much.
Oh,
Another
man,
Hanar doesn't look like it hurts.
Yeah. I'd almost forgotten how degenerate Priest vs. Rogue games can be. It's just so much generation. No one plays with any cards that are actually in their deck.
For even more value, just eking every last bit of card generation out of this Hanar.
My blood be born again.
Because of the hand space, I don't think this is a Potion of Illusion turn anymore.
Yes, yeah, I agree.
He
I mean,
could
I
just with the Jandis, but the way that Bankyugi's been playing, it feels like he's just gonna go for a bunch more secrets. Oh! Wow, okay. Well, the Flick gets rid of the first half of the One Maker and the other one.
I guess. It's interesting though, right? Because I would have thought that he would save the Potion of Illusion for something a little bit more impressive, considering how value-oriented he's been playing this game so far.
Me too. In terms of what's more impressive though, we're talking Togwaggle and Kronks, both of which normally cost 6 mana, so that would be the entire turn to get that on board and play Potion of Illusion. So Bankyugi could be thinking that it's
true.
very rare that I'll get something threatening to stick 2 turns. And so he's just kind of cutting his losses and accepting Flick and Hanar as copied minions, and that's not too bad at all.
I mean, I see your point, but I think with Galakrond in hand, almost fully activate, you have a chance to get a good minion for 1 mana. Or also just Jandis. Going for Jandis plus Potion of Illusion could very possibly get you quite a lot of value.
That would be pretty fun. New Warlock Priest dual class minion getting some work done for Posesi. He's still holding on to these Proto Drakes and that Plague of Death. We know Posesi is saving this Plague of Death as an ace in the hole because it's not a card that Bankyugi would have on mind, not being in Posesi's natural list. But it seems like every turn, the more Bankyugi or the more Posesi tries to remove from Bankyugi, the more Bankyugi is able to generate value because that Hanar stuck for so long, and now there's the second Hanar with Secret Train if he wants it.
It is absolutely insane. While I have my question marks about the Potion of Illusion there, it still can do incredibly powerful things with just this alone. I mean, I was looking, I've got to say, another Hanar turn there into maybe a big Edwin.
He can still play the Edwin here.
True.
Draconic Edwin,
Choose soon.
I think that would present the size of board where Posesi can't just beat around the bush anymore. And even if Posesi does expend some removal, be it Galakrond or a generated Plague of Death, then Bankyugi still has follow-up with the Jandis, with Galakrond, with Minar.
Even this is a little bit strange to me, because he could have gone Kobold Lackey plus Edwin and cleared off the Time Weaver as well.
I don't think he had much reason to trade a 3/6 with his 4/3.
I guess so. I guess so.
But there is that Plague of Death finally used. I think Bankyugi probably could smell that Posesi was holding on to something by that point, and he rips the Jandis as the next threat in the chain.
So there's the final invoke necessary to get us up to tier 3 Galakrond, with the Praise Galakrond, of course. Just needs to clear out some hand space, and with Waxadread as well. Now we're talking about value. This is huge.
That's absolutely crazy. Karj?
I like your
Hello?
Waxadread. I think I'll take it.
And while that's insane, and both decks definitely have a lot of value, I think Bankyugi's pretty far ahead in the value you can generate. Plus, this stunner. Oh my goodness. Which one do you even target?
It's stunning. I mean, I was going to snap say Proto Drake, which I think is probably still just the answer. But I can see your point about just effectively deleting Waxadread.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with the Proto Drake getting out of the way, especially since the Karj takes time to go off. Oh, wait, how much damage is this?
With a buff, that's 10, 17. That's
Feels
just
like
lethal.
it's lethal. Yeah. What? Out of nowhere?
That's just game.
Oh my.
Man, Bankyugi's Rogue is sick. I never thought I'd be saying that just basically good old Galakrond Rogue was the innovative, quirky deck that he's brought to the table, but with just a couple of new inclusions here, Ocean of Illusion, Loremaster Polkel in particular, it feels like this deck has just completely changed. The amount of value that it can make is staggering.
And is this list similar to the one that Casey touts as 70% versus Priest?
I don't know.
Because I have not seen this floating around on ladder, to be honest. The inclusion of Potion of Illusion, Lorekeeper Polkelt, these all seem like very greedy things to me, but if the main culprit on ladder is Priest, then I can understand why you would run things like this. And it seemed like almost the entire match, Bankyugi was ahead there, was looking a little scary on that one turn with the Cabal stealing his Shadow Jeweler Hanar, but a well-timed plagiarize put everything back in his favor. That was just pretty fun to watch, which I don't often say about Priest games.
Great fun to watch. I think that Bankyugi, despite being a bit of an unknown, even amongst the pro community, he is amongst the three newcomers. I think it's pretty fair to say that Alan is the real front runner and has the most wide-reaching support, at least amongst the English-speaking community, of course, with whom I interact. But I'm just liking a lot of what I see from Bankyugi so far, aside from a couple of weird, slightly memey moments at the end with throwing down an unnecessary Solarian Prime. He's bringing good decks, and I think he's playing them really well.
Yeah, can you please allow me to play Galakrond Rogue, Derek? I mean, yes, it's back to our old habits,
Fine.
but have you ever really lived if you haven't played Wand into Galakrond Kronk's Flick guaranteed?
No.
Right?
I'm just banning you, okay? We can't go back on it. As tempting as it may seem, we got to do something different and play these other decks. We know how Galakrond Rogue works.
That this deck is much different than it looked before, and I have to agree. It's just running the half, but the later half, it can just do very, very priest-like things, honestly, in terms of how much it generates.
That's right. But so now with the Rogue and the Mage out of the way, the two weird decks are done and dusted for Bankyugi. Now we're looking at just the Warrior. And I like the look of his Warrior a lot. Having the Horde Pillager in there in exchange for one Sky Raider, I think is a very worthy trade-off. And another card which could work fantastically for him is Zephyrus. If it does end up in the super late game, and I guess I was more specifically talking about the non-warrior mirror, where the bombs can ruin Zephyrus. But it could help him get over that finish line at the end and get that little bit of extra value that Posesi's deck is kind of lacking.
That's right. This is the matchup, or at least one of the matchups, that notoriously made our broadcast go on pretty long yesterday, at least in the other regions. Some of those decks featuring Rattlegore as being just the end-all be-all, I have to say, in the Warrior Mirror, at least, because without ways to silence that card, it just generates too much value for the opposing warrior to deal with. But what we're dealing with is very much a more evenly footed matchup, and I think that Posesi's list, I also have to agree, looks like it's a bit more favored because he's running Horde Pillager as an additional bomb generator.
Yes. Also having Dr.
Oh, sorry, that
Krastinov
was
for Bankyugi.
Bankyugi's list. My
Yes. Yeah. Exactly. I mean, the point still stands, right? Horde Pillager and Dr. Krastinov for Bankyugi both quite significantly up the amount of bombs that he can shuffle into his opponent's deck. Zephyrus, as I said at the start, due to Posesi shuffling bombs into Bankyugi's deck, I think will probably remain inactive for the entire course of the game. But given that neither player, like you said, has any real power meat in their late game with no Rattlegore or any of the other big threats outside of Deathwing, I think it is going to come down in no small part to shuffling as many bombs as possible.
And the question that was raised yesterday when Sottle and Raven were casting Europe is that when you're running Rattlegore, do you suddenly treat this not as a purely fatigue matchup? Would you prior card draw to try and get your Rattlegore first? In this matchup where neither player has that, I think that question is completely irrelevant now, because I think that the biggest individual threat of a minion is probably Blastmaster Boom, and if that comes now or later, it's not impossible for the opponent to deal with. So I think both players will be very hesitant to draw more cards than they absolutely need to. Risky Skipper possibly saved for Armorsmith value instead of Battle Rage.
Interesting. It's so weird how it works, because it's not really because they're afraid of fatigue, it's more just kind of because they're afraid of drawing all the bombs. Or, I mean, I guess it's also worth bringing up now, given that both decks have Skipper and Armorsmith, is it possible to go for one kind of huge whirlwind combo and gain enough armor to actually outlast the bomb damage, do you think?
I mean, these are all questions that we'll be answering for not this weekend, but many weeks of GM to come, I have to say, and these players we'll get to see their takes on it. Could very well be different from other players' takes on it. But what I expect to see mainly is just no cards drawn, possibly even an Ankar saved unless he absolutely needs Skipper to get some work done. So I look at the list and see this as a true fatigue matchup, but I could very well be proven wrong.
Well, we shall have to see. 2 Armorsmiths already in hand, ready to go for Bank Yugi in case he does need to go for the big armor gain, and especially with Ankar also available in hand, he could go to tutor out that risky Skipper as soon as possible. But maybe he never even plays the Ankar this game. He may just hold on to it and never draw any cards, as you were saying.
Right. But Posesi is the first one to draw the big threat of the game in that Blastmaster Boom. When that comes down, Bankyugi will of course be forced to respond because he's tanking upwards of 7 every single turn. And depending on whether Bankyugi has an efficient response to that, that might alter Posesi's game plan. Because if the boom bots are able to stick for more than a turn, then Posesi might be saying, I can't afford to draw cards now because I'm just killing Bankyugi.
I do also like
however,
that,
not swinging quite yet.
Well, that is exactly what I was going to bring up for both of these players, right? Bankyugi, for me, it makes a lot more sense to hold off on the weapon swings because he has Dr. Krastinov in the deck. He wants to make sure that when that is drawn, he can immediately, as soon as a minion is played from Posesi, rush that in, gain the extra durability, and shuffle an extra bomb. For Posesi on the other side, though, I don't believe he has any kind of durability buffing effects. So it really seems like he's just saving it because he wants to save the weapon swings. He doesn't seem see it as worth shuffling in the bombs quite yet.
Yeah, I guess so. And maybe because Krasnov, that's why we see Bankyugi actually expending some cycle now. Could also be that he just wanted to spend his mana and still fit in a hero power. I honestly am not sure if the players are even sure what the macro game plan should be, or whether it's even set in stone. It's very possible that certain events can trigger you to change the game plan, but Posesi has been very adamant about playing this as a true fatigue mirror. No cards played if not necessary. No weapon swings if they're not clearing minions, even if he has Blastmaster Boom in hand. And in this case, Bankyugi has to be the first to blink because he's the first to 10 cards in hand.
Well, that's kind of it, right? I think it's worth, given this is a very slow game so far, it's worth taking umbrage with the fact that we're calling it a true mirror, because it's kind of not, really. There are small factors that shift it quite drastically in favor of one player or another. And for Bankyugi, if he sees himself as being in the lead because of his extra ability to shuffle bombs, then, I mean, he can just draw extra cards, right? If he's not going to be dying in any likely scenario, he just wants to draw through to, as you said, Dr. Krasnov, Blastmaster Boom as well, and try to actually just kill Posesi.
What's crazy, though, is that Posesi's already drawn 3 bombs. Bankyugi is on the 3rd weapon because Horde Pillager was just played. It's possible that even more bombs are drawn before Bankyugi even gets to his Blastmaster Boom.
Yeah.
And then that suddenly is not too much additional value. I guess that's another reason for potentially holding off on swings. At least the 2nd Wrench Caliber, because he did want to just play Horde Pillager on curve. For Posesi, we could also see him return the expensive Blood Boil Brute play in... I don't mind this at all.
Interesting. He's being so reserved with his removal, because just like Sword and Board and like Shield Slam, it clears... I know that's premium removal being used, but it's clearing cards from your hand, whereas this is like a reasonably big threat that's just easy to clear off for your opponent.
Yeah, I was actually expecting him to swing into the 5/3 and then Blood Boil into the smaller minion so that the Blood Boil was not dead on board to the weapon. I can definitely get behind saving Shield Slam, though, because there's still, I think, Deathwing in the list and the opposing Blastmaster Boom, which we've seen Posesi be pretty lenient with his usage of Blade Storm. So single target removal is quite premium.
I can get on board with that. And I guess the kind of response to saying that the Blood Boil Brute is then easy to remove is every minion is always easy to remove. It's a control warrior deck. Nothing is going to stick this for a long, long time in this game.
A small caveat to that is when the armor is high, then everything is easy to remove. But this small window where Posesi only has 5 armor might mean that he is going to have a bit harder of a time to use Shield Slam. Bankyugi using up the final charge on a Wrench Caliber now.
And, well, also just throwing down another card draw effect there. This one is not like just purely drawing a card, because it also has the pretty big benefit of gaining an extra durability. But this is now 2 cards he's drawn to Posesi 0. This could have huge effects come the late game.
I think based on what we're seeing, that's why Posesi is okay with going for card draw now. He's just trying to make sure that he is at least one farther, not as deep in fatigue. I've never settled on what the adjective is meant to be.
Yeah, deeper, less deep. Yeah, I mean, whatever. We understand the meaning.
It comes to the point, though, where I think Bankyugi has to be playing a bit more for aggression now that he's used several card draw, and he's used the first 2 Wrench Calibers pretty liberally. That was just kind of funny, huh?
That was funny. I mean, it's weird because also for Posesi, it's kind of in his interest for there to be nothing on board so that Dr. Krasnov doesn't have anything to attack into once it comes down.
Absolutely. Bankyugi, though, who knew that Corsair Cash for no draws is actually the nuts for this matchup? It's just clear up space in the hand.
Yeah,
And now Posesi has to dump something.
I mean, that's such a. I totally understand what you're saying, but like, all of these cards are basically doing that as well. Like, you can just play them, and they also kind of do nothing. And it's weird that the human brain kind of frames it as this is better.
Okay, aside from the Anchor, everything that Bankyugi has can do something later on, right? The Corsair Cache does not draw him anything, unlike the Shield Slam, the Shield Block. It's not something he wants to save for later either. This Battle Rage for 0 draws is the nuts.
I mean, well, again, I get what you're saying, but just okay. This is not worth arguing at this point in the series. But yes, I see your point.
As
the
a
cards that do
dumpable
nothing,
card, I'm saying those were good because you don't want to just dump Armor Smith. He wants to save them for a bigger skipper turn. But that never happened.
As dumpable cards, they were good. But then, like, is just putting your deck full of wisps the nuts, because those are all bad and you can all just dump them out.
I mean, for this matchup, you would rather have cards that are dumpable. That's what I'm saying.
Fair enough.
But here's the problem you were talking about. No minions on board. Krastenov has no target. And now there's nothing that's easily dumpable. If you could play Brawl for no targets, you would. But is it just going to be Lord Barov here, for example? Because it seems kind of redundant with Brawl.
I mean, maybe you just start overdrawing, right? Like, there are some good cards left in the deck, but you could overdraw
like
bombs.
The bombs are not a high enough concentration to dump just yet. He has the Boom still in his deck. He has Deathwing left there. Oh, that hurt for Posesi.
Yeah, but I mean, he's also just deliberately overdrawing. Like, he's anticipating this happening. I mean, for Posesi, it's more of a real idea to allow the bombs to be deliberately overdrawn.
Posesi only has 1 left in the deck. I feel like he's drawn 3 throughout the course of this game. Bankyugi swung 4 times.
Oh, the nuts! Oh my god, this card has 0 potential to ever do anything. Put 30 of them in my deck.
I'm serious! It's good for the situation. Okay. I mean, if Bankyugi has drawn everything good that's left, then I would advocate overdrawing. But he needs to hit his Boom. He would much rather his Deathwing. And then the rest of it can pretty much just be ignored. For Posesi, I think that's why we're seeing him deliberately overdraw.
Yeah. So, okay, the question is here, 'cause if we all think back to one of the most famous games of Hearthstone ever, it's, Amnesiac Zalay in the DreamHack Finals, where they're both just passing every turn in the token Druid mirror. You know the one I'm talking about?
Yes, I am.
And someone has to be wrong in that equation, right? It's what I hear Sottle say all the time, is that someone, if you had infinite computational power, you would be able to figure out who is winning if we both keep doing this. Is this the same situation? Could you maths it out if your brain was big enough to where one of the players has to do something to have a chance?
You probably could math it out, but my brain is not nearly big enough to do that.
I'm not saying that you should do it, but do you think that's the situation we're in?
It definitely feels like it, because one player is deeper in fatigue than the other. One player has more potential to generate bombs than the other. It just so happens that those 2 conditions kind of cancel each other out in terms of benefit, so I'm not sure which of those 2 conditions is more relevant. Okay, there's the Boom though. Bankyugi, I think, can start swinging now. It's getting to the point where if he wants to get the full value off of this Boom, he needs to get all the bombs in the deck as soon as possible so they have the least chance of being drawn immediately after, so that the Boom can get more Boom bots. But he's holding on, and now my brain is fried. I don't get it anymore.
He's holding on to
holding
everything.
on to these for Boom.
Yeah, I mean, also that was like a decent Dr. Krastenov that could have just come down to gain the extra charges there.
It's true. I mean, he would still end up having to swing into it, but that damage is pretty irrelevant with the amount of armor he has.
I mean, this is the thing, right? Is that you can only test the control bomb warrior matchup so many times when this is how it goes.
Before
in
you go
testing.
crazy.
Exactly. Or even just physically, you don't have time in the day to test it that much when it's so
right.
close to the new expansion. And so I'm just willing to see what the players' thought process is when it comes down to it. What are they specifically saving these cards for? What is the perfect moment for Krastinov or Blastmaster Boom?
Don't know. I would say for Boom, it's just as simple, but ideally when you have the most bombs. Just so you can get that damage down. Guaranteed from the Kaboom bots.
A 3-mana 3/2 Lord Bruv. Straight vanilla.
That's a bruv moment right there.
This whole game is top 1 Bruv moments.
Okay, and Posesi's like, okay, wait, you said it's playable.
Oh!
I guess it's playable for me too. Is that what's happening here? We're waiting for the opposing person to explain the matchup and what's acceptable as a disposable card.
This is like 2 English people trying to get through a door right here. It's no, you first. No, please, you. No, after you. I insist.
He swings!
He swings.
I'm sensing a boom, but then there's a bruv. So immediately clear the boom bots.
He just
Also,
felt like it. Like that was the time.
Okay, that second shield slam use is super weird to me. He hasn't seen Boom or Deathwing yet. This Deathwing is just able to survive, right? Oh, I guess there's still Blade Storm. Okay. Man.
Krastinov being saved for as well. Like that could have just been attacked.
Surely
in there,
this
right?
is the Boom turn. It's all 3 bombs, I believe. If
Did he
swung,
want to go Boom
it smells
Blades?
like...
Did he want to go Boom Blade Storm on the same turn? It doesn't really make much sense to me if he did.
If you are looking to immediately activate the bombs so you guarantee they all go face, I would prefer to see Skipper, because Blade Storm, I think he needs to save it for Deathwing. Or he could just play it out like this and just say you don't necessarily need the bombs to all go face. And likely they still would, because Posesi's best answer is Brawl. I mean, he has to be in the lead here, right? Even though he's deeper in fatigue. There's more bombs in Posesi. Is he even deeper in fatigue? Might not be, because...
Whoa!
Wow.
That was like 20 damage!
Yeah, Bankyugi has this in the bag. Zephyrus active. That's just a Tyrion.
Whoa! Okay, I mean, I guess you just take that, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's still bombs in Posesi's deck. He's running out of ways to heal back up. I mean, there's the Skipper Armorsmith turn. Is it gonna be enough?
Okay, so
he has to rip the Skipper now.
Yeah, it's Ripper Skipper time. And he just has to gain an absurd amount of armor all at the same time, right? Whilst also trying to dodge what this bomb is doing, which I guess play the Sky Raider first. That makes sense, just to get more minions down.
And it ultimately doesn't solve his problems, because even if he delays for a long time, Bankyugi can respond in kind. And it's similar to the Enrage Warrior matchup, where the second person to Skipper is often far in the lead.
Right, and if that was the turn there for Posesi to gain all that armor, 12 is not that much.
This is what we were saving Krastinov for. It was for the Ashbringer.
Oh my god. Bankyugi, you absolute cheeky legend.
Never loses from this.
Oh, okay, that is sick.
Whew. I mean, this is what we predicted by looking at the lists. the way we got to this point was a long, meandering, winding road. But it makes sense.
I mean, this is also kind of weird with respect to how Posesi slow played his bombs. He didn't want to shuffle a whole bunch of them in, obviously to try and activate a Blastmaster Boom as well as possible. But it meant that Zephyrus was active nice and early in the matchup, relatively speaking.
Yeah. I have to note that part. It could be that he was trying to do that thing where you just save all your bombs to chain off at the end when the deck is empty. But it's hard to do that when you wing in per turn. And that was quite clearly heavily in Bankyugi's favor towards the end there. Yeah. I just need to ask a whole bunch of experts how you're supposed to approach the matchup. And when the lists are more similar, how are you supposed to approach the matchup?
I mean, one thing I will say is that it's been a while since we've had those kinds of games, the fatigue mirrors in Asia Pacific. So we very much had to settle back into things here. I mean, I think that series took longer than like the first 3 weeks of season 1 for Asia Pacific, all tallied up together. But it was still, I think, a lesson in remembering that a single tech card, if not 2 or 3, that Bankyugi had in his advantage, can significantly weigh the advantages in your favor. Like having both Dr. Krasinov and Zephyrus and the Horde Pillager, it's just too much for Posesi to overcome. And so he valiantly throws it down at the end. He will be going on to this decider match later on today. But what it also means, on a more upbeat note, is that Bankyugi, in his first day that we're seeing him play in GM, is sailing straight through very cleanly to the semi-finals in a lineup, I will say, I was a non-believer in it at the start. I didn't really see the reasoning behind it. I thought they were slightly weird decks. Maybe he was relying a little bit too much on comfort picks that he played in the previous meta. I'm willing to admit I've been proven wrong by Bankyugi here.
Absolutely. And the level of play, even though there were some blips here and there, I think macro game plan, he had a very, very great understanding. And I'm just so excited to see how he stacks up against Chonsu in particular, if we get to see that matchup, because we were praising Chonsu and Posesi's lineup as being called for this week. But Yugi seems to have built decks that can prey on those more controlling decks a bit better, or not necessarily prey on them, but they don't fall as weak to them compared to an aggressive rogue. His Galakron rogue seems to be able to very easily outvalue Priest, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it arms tomorrow.
As do I. But that, of course, means that with him, Bankyugi, being sent through to the semi-finals, we have to find out who is joining him. None of the competitors who started today have been eliminated quite yet.